Most Christians think they know what happened to Judas. He betrayed Jesus for 30 pieces of silver, then he hanged himself. But that's only one version. Another biblical book says Judas bought land and exploded. Same Bible, two stories. Let's read them. We're going to be comparing Matthew and Acts in regards to Judas. First off, let's talk about what happens to the money that Judas gets. In Matthew, Judas throws the money into the temple, the priest by the potter's field. In Acts, Judas buys a field himself with the reward of his wickedness. So who bought the field? In Matthew it says the priest do. In Acts it says Judas does. Now let's talk about how Judas dies. In Matthew it says he went away and hanged himself. In Acts it says in the field that he bought, he fell headlong and he burst open in the middle and all his bowels gushed out. Hanging versus falling in disembowelment. These are not the same story. The third contradiction is about why the potter's field gets the name Field of Blood. In Matthew, it's because the priest bought it with blood money. In Acts, it's named that because Judas's violent death in that field. Same name, two different explanations. There's one more thing I want to talk about here from Matthew 27. This isn't necessarily a contradiction, but it definitely looks like a mistake. In verses 9 through 10, Matthew quotes a prophecy that he says comes from Jeremiah. They took 30 pieces of silver, the price set on him by the people of Israel, and they used them to buy the potter's field, as the Lord commanded me. You can look through the entire book of Jeremiah, and you won't find a quote that lines up with this. The wording actually comes from Zechariah 11, verses 12 and 13. Here are some common explanations that many people give for these problems in Scripture. About what happens with the silver, apologists will say that Judas bought the field indirectly. It was his money, so it still counts as him buying it. That's not how words work. Matthew explicitly says the priest bought the field because Judas could not. Acts explicitly says Judas acquired it himself. Both authors are clear. They don't overlap. And about how Judas died, people will say the rope snapped or the body fell later, so both accounts are true. That sequence is never stated in either Matthew or Acts. Acts presents the fall as the cause of death, not a secondary event. Judas falls in the field. It doesn't make any sense that Acts would just choose to omit the hanging part. Notice that these harmonization attempts are almost always adding details not in the text. And about the field of blood, the obvious explanation is that it was called that for both the reasons stated in the Bible. I'll admit, I immediately thought this myself when looking into this, but I think it's important to note that each author gives a single explanation and shows no awareness of the other as far as the text is concerned. So while this explanation makes sense, given the rest of the information we have about these authors' conflicting accounts, we don't have good reason to believe this is the case. About Matthew getting the prophets mixed up, the popular explanation seems to be that Matthew is loosely citing Jeremiah. Ancient authors often blended prophets together, they say. Matthew names Jeremiah specifically. That's the problem here. The wording comes from Zechariah. There's no passage in Jeremiah. that talks about 30 pieces of silver given to a potter. This reflects theological interpretation, not citation accuracy. I just don't see it. Naming the wrong prophet is still an error, even if it's intentional. And in general, you will often hear that the Bible doesn't need to agree in details. Different perspectives don't mean contradictions, but these aren't different perspectives. These are entirely different accounts about what happened. I can understand an author placing emphasis on something different than another author, but opposite claims about how someone died is clearly a contradiction. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I look forward to making another. See you later in the next one.